Hi, welcome to our DNA After Hours cast. I'm Jan, Managing Director here. I'm sitting with Kesh, our CEO. Today we're talking about something a little bit more serious. We're discussing the legalization of drugs, narcotics, and the consequences. We've seen some countries legalize it. In Singapore, it's still very strict, and we have the ultimate consequence, which is the death penalty. And we thought it'd be something to discuss because really it is the ultimate price that you pay for anything. You know, for anything that you do, it's there's nothing further than having your life taken away, and it's something that I know, like, as society we have decided there are consequences for certain things that we do, and now, you know, as it's, you know, it's, what was it, it's 2021, so we're all talking about all these things and trying to move us, you know, towards a more...
I was trying to push the conversation a bit further to see whether in Singapore, this could be a reality at some point where, you know, where you're not completely paying the entire price for a moment of folly.
Well, you see, like, when we say a moment, so, I mean, we're going to have to be devil's advocate at times. We're going to have to, do you know what I mean? Because I already have a few conflicting, but I don't know if conflicting but still valid
arguments,
arguments, ideas about this, and you know, yes, it is a moment, but what led up to that moment, and how long have they been in that moment, you know, because I've been in Australia, I've seen people disappear, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a little while before they disappear. They're no longer the same person. And in fact, you know, like we've all seen the pictures, the meth pictures, and they've got, you know, their skin things, and they're barely human. And in Australia, I've seen people like this walking around, and you just, your heart does go out to them, but at the same time, you're like, well, I better stay away, because you know what I'm saying. And therefore, there's that societal, what is it, prevention. So there's the prevention, and then there's also the consequence. And we're discussing both. Whether or not we are pushing for, I mean, Singapore seems like with such heavy penalties, it's very much preventative as well as consequential, and it's the ultimate consequence. Which honestly, to me, is quite heartbreaking.
No, I don't know, because in my opinion, I think there are varying factors. I'm not per se all out for the legalization of 100% of drugs, but I think there should be some kind of, because I don't think drugs are the so-called, the one that leads you down that rabbit hole. I'll put it this way. I think it comes from many different aspects, from alcohol, from be it whatever substance that you're abusing. But these guys are given a second chance, whereas consumption of drugs, they don't get the second chance in this place. And so that's what I feel. So I don't know if, I'm speaking strictly about Singapore, because I've lived in Indonesia. I know guys who are completely off their faces every day.
Same.
And they're locked up in rooms because they're just afraid, people are afraid to let them out because they don't know what they're going to do. But I wouldn't say either side of the coin works, but I think if they're going to do something when it comes to drugs, I think this should be mirrored or be parallel anyway with alcohol.
Because alcohol is a drug.
It is a drug.
It is a drug as well.
More people succumb to it than drugs.
We should look at those stats as well, because alcohol.
G-Man, look at those stats. Alcohol-related incidents in Singapore versus drug-related incidents.
I mean, but that wouldn't be a fair comparison, because drugs are so illegal in Singapore. So, but then, do you know?
The only reason why it's not is because
the penalties are so heavy. Exactly. So we're back to chicken and egg.
Exactly. Yeah. So but I believe in that in that argument that there has to be some kind of relativity, right, to how we deal or what we decipher is more detrimental to society.
Well, we were also talking about how.
But also, guys, big shout out to APB for our sponsorship. I'm not putting, this is not a comparison thing, it's just that how we feel it should be approached. We have beers on our set almost every other time we're shooting, but it's only because that's how we roll. We have to roll this way. But anyway, don't drink too much.
We were talking about like some of the Scandinavian countries, right? And how their penalties are, not only are their penalties less heavy, their prisons are incredibly humane. And they're open air, there's a trust-based system.
You can go in the morning and come back by 6 and you actually are a functioning person in society. Or that is that what the objective is. You know, they should get you jobs that you literally walk out of prison and you come back home or come back to prison at 6. But I don't know, like I said, that is a very far-fetched idea in this part of the world, to be honest. I mean, I can definitely stand up for that, but I know that's a whole different. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this part of the world's ready for, say, you rehab is not the thing that I think they are looking at.
Well, that's the thing, you know. Like I looked at their system and I thought, well, you know, so much of when we think prison, we think punishment. You know, like we were just talking before, and the language that we used was consequence, And I find it quite. I mean, the humane side, the compassion side is one thing, where when people go to prison over there, they don't go to be punished. They go to be healed. They go to heal. They have counseling. You know, they're treated like human beings. They're treated with dignity, and then what happens at the end of it is that you get dignity in return, in a way. Like
correct.
No, I mean, of course, it's not for everyone. So there's you know, like there's the 80-20 rule, right? So you look at the US and Australia. I don't know about the stats in Singapore.
G-Man, pull out those stats.
For reoffending
in Singapore.
Yeah, so
I don't think it's very high.
General rule it's 80-20. So 80% will reoffend, whereas.
But they fear you into reoffending in Singapore.
Yeah.
So I mean, to a certain element, I mean, I'm not going to like say, Jen. We can talk about the U.S. criminal justice system and all that. I mean, it's a much deeper layers. I'm talking about just here per se. I mean, I think we digress when we speak about that because there's like a systematic failures with racism, with this and that. That goes a much deeper part of it. Yeah, by privatized prisons and, you know, for-profit prisons anyway. That's all a bit. It's not something that we have here. This is just going back here to Singapore. I don't think that reoffensive, because Singapore has that stigma once you leave prison. You know, it's not something that you can wash off. You know. No,
but that's everywhere. Yeah, it's not just Singapore.
No, but I think in our society, if you go and apply for a job as an ex-offender, your likelihood of you getting a job that you...
Yeah, but doesn't it happen everywhere?
No, not to the rate that we have over here. I mean, we have the Yellow Ribbon Project.
That's a good project.
But no, 2020, low percentage of reoffending in Singapore. But what numbers are we looking at? 22.1%.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's Singapore.
So they've done it on.
And that's based on.
Where those numbers come
from?
Where
do you get the numbers from? Anyway, Jen, what are you saying about the?
So we're in Singapore, the 80-20, we've got that good 80-20. So like some countries, they have the bad 80-20, which is the other, yeah? So we're on par with the Scandinavian countries, but I think the difference is over there, people come out with a bit more healing, whereas for us, people come out with fear, right? Yeah. And it's like, don't reoffend because the penalties are so heavy.
Also, I don't think it's just so much the fear of going back in. I think it's also that trauma of being in there. Of course, that adds to the fear, but and also the trauma of being back out in Singapore is not that. Put it this way, it's not that punishing as say you could be 40 years in prison in the US and you come out, you don't know what's going on. No family, no friends, no support system, nothing, right? I don't know, to a certain extent, I think Singapore will have that stigma for ex-offenders, but we don't normally lock you up for that amount of years unless you're life in prison or you're meant to hang. Put it this way. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as you're going to be stuck for 50 years or like how they do in other countries, like namely the US, to be honest, where you can be sentenced to 9 life imprisonments or sentenced to 1,200 years in prison, which is, you know, you're going to die, but you're not going to kill you.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that part of it plays a certain part, but I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if Singapore, to be honest, Jen, the reoffending rate looks really good on paper, but I don't know if it actually helps that 22.1% because neither one of us here are in that stat. So I think it's a bit different conversation to have, but I think if we, not say legalizing narcotics is a big thing, but that is the biggest thing when it comes to...
It is it 90%, right, of our, when it comes to death penalty.
Yeah. And,
it's drug offences, trafficking offences. And what was it? We've had, according to Amnesty International, we've hung 400 people since 1991. We've hung 76 in 1994.
That's the highest ever per year.
That was the highest ever.
Yeah.
And so far, since independence, we've only had about 6 or 7 clemencies.
6 clemencies.
6 clemencies.
Yeah.
And they're only for Singaporeans. So, I mean, we're not quite debating the effectiveness of it, because that was the other thing I was going to add on to it, which was that 80-20 thing. We've got the humane side, the compassion side, but then there's also the practical side about how effective it is as a deterrent. And it truly is. You think twice before doing something when you're in Singapore, and like we unfortunately I have to do a slight comparison like with Australia. So we've got the sentences are more humane, but it's a bigger drug problem. But at the same time, it's
not really though. Just going by the recent rates, the drug problems have gone up from 2018 to 2019. 2019
for
is
us,
higher. Yeah,
for us.
Yeah.
Well, does COVID have something to do with that? Like
COVID's 2020.
Like everyone's like.
Yeah, but it's true. We actually have an increasing drug issue. But I think that we are too. Jen, I don't know how to say this, but I think without sounding too, my opinion again, I'll start with this. I think we're getting too hard with certain drugs. I won't say all, but certain drugs. I think that is where I think we falter. We got increasing drug crimes in Singapore. It's not like we're going down. But we're going down in every other thing, like pickpockets and this and then.
Is it going up in respective to our population size? Because that's what I mentioned. Because
that's possible.
But is it a percentage? Percentage, then it's not. But if the actual numbers are going up, then is that relative to
increase in population?
Because there's more drug problems in Australia, but there are also 23 million compared to 6 here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes more sense. Yeah, I think it's in relative. G-man, I think it's in relative to to population growth. I think. Yeah.
And I wonder how cultural it is. We know because we're so exposed to American and Western media and stuff, right? So it's legal in the US, right?
In some states,
but there is a lot of drug culture. I mean, when we say drug, like marijuana, right? That's coming through. It's really filtering through all the TV shows, the comedians. I'm sure our censors in Singapore have a little bit of. They're trying to catch up as much as they can. But it's something that is at our doorstep, yeah? It is something that we I don't know if we should talk about it or we shouldn't, but it's there. Because we're global now. We're so global now. And maybe that's why we thought we wanted to talk about it without even understanding really why. Because
no, I don't know. Because I feel like in Singapore we should. Not per se, I say legalize all, but be legal for recreational drugs. I think, Singapore, I still believe has a long way to go. We're too small a country to be legalizing everything else. But I think cannabis, for example, that if you allow cigarettes, I'm sure you can allow alcohol, I'm sure you can allow cannabis. There's certain things that I believe, anyway, that should be recreational and be allowed. Instead of locking someone up for... Okay,
possession, I think.
Oh, wait, hold on. It's got, what? Repeat, now both lower than 2019. Drug abusers.
That's pretty good.
So from 2019 to 2020, it went back down. That makes sense.
That's good.
Okay, so COVID helped. You couldn't get the pushers out.
No, bro, because no shipping, no flights, no flights.
Boats are not coming in.
Okay, well, there is shipping, but there's no, I don't know. What?
The drones couldn't fly in. Yeah, but anyways. Okay, well. But going back to that point, I think there's certain things that could be recreational, and I still believe that we are, I think, a society that can handle that.
Okay, well, we've been talking on the practical side. We've been talking about, the not consequence, but the symptom of the issue. And then from a holistic point of view, addiction stems from deeper issues. The drugs or the alcohol or the shopping or the work or the whatever, anything you can be addicted to, there is something else at the root of it, And I find it effective to treat the person. It's like Chinese medicine and Western medicine and treating the symptom or treating the person. And with Singapore, at the moment it's very like we treat the symptom, like if we are lucky our problems, our drug issues are low because our penalties are so heavy. But now we're talking about how that practice itself, is it harmful to our society in general?
Yeah, but I don't think, Jen, I don't think we actually treat the symptoms here. I think we look at the consequences of the addiction before we start looking into the symptoms here. Like, for example, that's like, we never had, like, say, drink driving. We never thought that someone's going to drive his car straight into a mall because he was drunk until we implemented laws. So we always looked at the...
We're reactive.
Yeah, so we saw the consequence of, say, drugs being sold in nightclubs before we even realized drugs were being sold in the nightclubs and why people are buying drugs. There's no studies done on all this, but we thought, kids are getting messed up, they're getting into gang fights and whatever down in... And then we worked ourselves backwards.
That's right. It's reactive, but that's most of the world. Most of the world's reactive.
Usually, but I think for a population as small as ours or a very tight population, it's slightly more manageable. I'm sure the government has got playbooks. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming, or in my opinion, they might have playbooks behind all this before they even created all this. But I think it's always a reaction of consequences. So we go like, okay. Then we work ourselves back. So I don't think we normally work with symptoms per se. Until last year, I believe, when alcohol addiction was not considered a mental disease, or depression wasn't considered a mental disease.
Well, now we know that alcoholism is actually physical. It's physiological as well after a point. And it's the same with drugs, because it affects you.
But the thing is that it's not treated the same though. You see, like you go to jail for that, but you don't get to jail now. Very recently. For what alcohol addiction and depression. Depression back then was considered an IMH issue. Very recently it was allowed to be an IMH issue. Check that out for me. I'm pretty sure it's quite recent.
But now they're starting to understand the physiological...
Now you actually go to a counselor and this and that. But ask you exactly a year ago, no, it wasn't. It's not classified as one. Alcohol as well. Alcohol addiction was... And if we can put these guys into it, we have something called DRC here in Singapore, right? The Drug Rehab Center. It's basically prison. It's not like you're going for rehab and you're coming out in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, or you can check yourself into rehab. We don't have the facilities. So either you get arrested and you're going into prison. Well,
you're penalized for consuming here and possession. Consuming and possession in Singapore, whereas... And it's not just trafficking, whereas in other countries, if you're a consumer or it's just on your body, it's counseling or it's counseling. It's or community service. Because you're not a trafficker. You're not a dealer. You're the customer. So I guess there's a bit more balance with that. But that said, there is more cases because of that. So then we're back to the same.
But nah, Jen, I don't think that is the reason why it is. I think the reason, I can probably try to do a poll on the first 1,000 Singaporeans that have left this country, if they've ever done anything illicit overseas. I'm sure that poll will come up pretty high. Let's be honest, yeah? But we don't do it here.
Yes.
It's not because I think we don't per se. I think it's also we don't, because the access is not possible over here. Or that's not our thing. I don't wake up in the morning and say I need a joint, man. But if I had it, 100% I will, right? I mean, you got to edit this out, yeah? Thank you. But, you don't wake up. But then on the other hand, you get guys here wake up saying, no, I'm just going to go to the coffee shop for myself, 20 beers and get drunk by 2.
Are there?
Of course, go to the local coffee shop in Singapore. You don't see one guy
Not in the morning.
I've been there 7 in the morning for marketing stuff with my mom. You get 300 guys sitting out there having a Carlsberg or a Guinness Stout at 7 in the morning. Of course we have. Come on, man. But somehow that's okay. That's
because it's alcohol. It's socially acceptable, right?
Yeah, because it's legal. Not say socially acceptable. If you look at the guy and go like, man, what poor guy, man. Well, I wouldn't say that it's socially acceptable. But the same thing I say if a guy is sitting there shooting heroin in the coffee shop, you won't say poor guy. You would just call the police. You see that extent of it, but the implications of both are pretty much the same. You know what I mean? You're going to call the cops on someone drinking at 7 in the morning in the market when you're having breakfast. I mean, that's his breakfast. Because you're conditioned that way to think that's fine to drink. But you're not conditioned to like drugs isn't. If you come from poor communities, remember you brought this conversation up when we were sitting in the office in Australia, where meth towns and all that.
Oh, it's we call it.
Yeah, we call it the ghettos.
So sad.
Yeah, we call it ghettos in Brooklyn. It's just normal. You're a crackhead anyway.
Yeah, it's so sad.
But that is their breakfast, for example. Like we would think about it like, oh, poor guys. But for them, it's like, that's just crack Charlie. That's her name. It's just normal. That's how it works. So I don't know. You want to put it in. Be fine drinking in the morning. Poor thing. Guy needs help. Maybe he really enjoys his beer. I wouldn't know, right? Maybe he really likes his beer.
Of course he does, but
maybe he stops drinking at 2 and sleeps all the way after that and goes to work as a functioning CEO for someone. For all you know, right? And then he just wakes up at 7 because he stops work at 6 and has a beer at 7 before he heads back home to sleep. But our judgments as a society be like, why are you drinking at 7 in the morning, man? There's something wrong with you. That's us. The same thing applies the other way around as well, Ganesh, what was the last thing about the IMH thing? When was it allowed? When was it recognized as a mental health? Alcohol addiction was a mental health issue.
End of last year.
Last year, what date? When is it implemented?
This year, March.
This year, March.
So we're growing.
Yeah,
we're
it took us
growing.
that long
We're growing.
So,
we're getting there.
Yeah.
But that was the other thing we were talking about, the maturity of a society, right? How we and it's broad, it's inclusive. It includes the people who aren't getting into trouble, and then how we treat people who have fallen. And who was it that said that? If you want to look at how a society is doing,
look at the lowest 5%.
Look at the people who are, what do they call us? Snowflakes, right? If you're too compassionate and I understand the need.
No, that wasn't snowflakes thing. I think that's more like easily bruised. And that's not so what a snowflake is.
No, but having that, I do
the
feel
empathy and the compassion. That's not a snowflake. That's anyway. But having those qualities, it's prevalent, but it's not something that has been or will be something socially we look for in our society here. It's each man for his own.
Is that in general, or is that more specific to Singapore? Because
I'm Singapore. No, we're talking about Singapore here.
Yeah.
I don't think no one cares about how well you do. except it's your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother. But in the greater scheme of things, we always care about, is each man for himself?
That's the other thing. They did a couple of surveys, right, about the death penalty, and overwhelmingly, like over 80%. I think there were 2 surveys, and there was one that was like 86% out of 1,200 people. They're in favor of the death penalty, and I understand that the thinking behind it. It's preventative, and it's and it works. Yeah, it works. No. And but then so does the humane approach.
Yeah.
It also works.
Yeah.
And so if you've got two systems that both work, why wouldn't we go for the more humane one? That's my...
No, I'm with you. But when I think that poll was asking, because when you bring about the death penalty, what I think most Singaporeans think about is murder. They think about kidnapping, rape. They don't necessarily think about drugs.
Yes, you're right. Most people are thinking about murder, but Singapore's terrorism as well. It's that discharging a weapon is also death penalty.
But if you're discharging a weapon, you're probably out to kill, to murder someone, right? I think that is what Singaporeans are probably think about when you say the death penalty. Not per se thinking about a 20-year-old kid is trafficked, say 20 kilos of heroin across the causeway. That's not something that I should think about, but. So that would be my opinion on this one. So if you actually put that whole humane factor into say, if a 20-year-old kid who unknowingly was given a package to walk across the causeway and give it to say another guy for 500 ringgit or 500 Singapore dollars, he has no clue what he's doing. But if you ask them in that sense of compassion, I'm sure Singaporeans will be like, you know what, man, cut the kid's slack, man. Something I'm sure that would happen. But a lot of us think of death penalty. Even if you ask me naturally about death penalty, I would think about murder. That's what I would think about. I wouldn't be really thinking about, because drugs are not a huge part of our lives.
No. Not here. Not in Singapore.
Not in general for me anyway, but I'll speak for myself. But I don't think about that. I think about a kid being murdered and being buried in a bush, or I think about,
Yeah, premeditated, planned, like malicious or whatever it is. But
so that kind of stats could be very misleading when it comes to what the question was actually asked.
Well, they did make an amendment to that law in 2012. So instead of it being mandatory, it's now, there are parameters of which it's no longer a mandatory sentence, depending on, I think it was, if you help the police with the investigation, then yes, you may have that mandatory part removed from your sentence. And there was something else. It might be the amount of the drug. I can't be we might have a look at that.
Yeah, so I mean, in that sense, I'm sure Singaporeans but also I'm very happy that the Parliament in Singapore recently had a debate about the mandatory death sentence. I think this happened.
When?
I think it's last year, but I got to fact check this again. This is again, G-Man's got to go and do it. When was the debate about the death penalty in Parliament? I think it was last year or 2 years ago. And we are moving forward as a country. I'm not saying because we are allowing this kind of debates to happen in Parliament, in places where it actually matter, not just here in a pantry in the office. But I think that part of it is still got a very long way to go. But going by those stats that you quoted, I don't think Singaporeans are thinking about.
Yes, about the drugs and stuff. They're more thinking about murder.
Because it's not relatable, right? But because they can think that I could get murdered tomorrow. Yeah. But they wouldn't think that, my kids could be drug addicts tomorrow. That's not something.
Because it's not
normal.
It's a very small and but then that brings us back to why it's so little, because the penalties are so heavy, right?
2017 we had that debate in Parliament.
Right. So it's like sometimes I look at the Singapore government and I think it's like your parents. How your parents, like and like growing up Asian, that's the other thing. Like our parents tend to be a little bit more strict.
Yeah, but doesn't mean they are right or wrong, right?
No.
So the thing is that we got to move out of this government. And the government has been a great government here in Singapore. I mean, it's moved us to where we are today. But I think it's about time to let people take the lead. Not so much about I think the society has that we live in today, Jen, they're a lot more well-traveled. They've matured to a point where I think they can make their own decisions.
Yeah.
And I think it's about time the government, my opinion again, I mean, they've done a great job. And till today, and I'm sure they will for the next 50 years as well. Now I'm going off track, so I got to be very careful.
Isn't it already happening? Aren't we already, like you said?
You got to edit that out, yeah? We're going to go back to society again.
But like you said, in 2017 we had the debate.
Yeah.
So aren't we already kind of growing in the right direction? It's just taking time to get there.
Exactly. No, Jen. I taking time to get there is one thing, right? But having leaders to bring a proper case up is another thing altogether. It's not so much about that. I think fundamentally as a society, I think we should be able to, if in my organization here, with all of you guys here, I don't fundamentally want to tell you what you have to do. It's never been my core. So I always say, you guys do what you have to do, I go do what I have to do. But if you guys follow a line, I'll figure it out. And I always kept that, right? Because I don't really, because I think you guys are mature, old enough to go and figure out what you guys have to do. So in that aspect, I think this society has matured, and I think is in the process of getting there.
Yep.
But it's all about, it's like giving a kid a new toy every time. We used to give them little balloons or whatever when they were kids so it doesn't hurt them, or plush toys or whatever. And today they are 3 years, so you give them an iPad, which they can smash in the head and break this. But it's okay now. But they've grown up. You see? So that's what I'm trying to get at as a society. I think we have grown up.
Yeah.
I think it's okay they let us make the decisions that we want to make and face the consequences accordingly if we step out of line.
Yeah.
That's where I think.
And I agree, that whole you were talking about how we, when Singaporeans agree with the death penalty, and maybe most people are thinking about murder and not thinking so much about the drugs. Well, it brings me back to the same, I wouldn't say argument, but the same concept or idea that if you're the victim, most people want a justice. Yeah, most people want something to be done. And there's, on one hand, it helps everybody because it helps the whole society be safer, and don't do this, you're hurting someone, unfortunately you hurt someone, we're going to have to punish you, that kind of stuff. So if we go back to just the murder itself, the death penalty, it's the same argument, right? If I was a victim, then you want that justice. But what if I was the perpetrator? What if it was my family that was the perpetrator? Yeah, right? That I don't know about anyone else, but for me that would change things, It seriously would. Like if someone hurt my family, I would be very, very upset. And I have been through that. We spoke about this briefly. I have been through that curve where it's like, no, we need justice. But then if it was my family that committed the crime, and then therefore now their life is in the balance because they took someone else's life, but it completely changes.
Yeah, but that's when it changes the way you feel about something.
Yes.
But the way that you think is different from the way you feel about something. Like, this is the thing where you're emotionally involved in a decision, or you're professionally, or in your head exactly where you're going. Like, it wouldn't cause you any grief if it happened to your neighbor and you go like, yeah, he deserves that. But somehow when it comes to you, your thought processes go from here, not from here anymore.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like the same principle I gave you about being in the army. If someone intentionally shot at someone at our head, wouldn't the first thing be for you to raise your gun and shoot back?
Yes.
And would that be technically wrong for me to do it?
When you'd be at war, right?
Yeah, but technically that's what we're supposed to do, right? It's someone, that's how life works. And that's why it's not so much being at war, but it's being the fact that these are my guys.
That you will protect your family.
Of course. If my boys are being shot at, the first thing you do is you draw your first weapon and you shoot. And I'm not saying that I shoot at the person, I'm not saying shooting at random people, but obviously he's meditated. I'm not talking about an accident where someone punched someone and he somehow fell down, hit his head against a... That one is definitely not premeditated. That was what you call it, manslaughter? Oh, sorry, homicide. Culpable homicide.
Culpable homicide in Singapore?
Yeah. That one, that's an unfortunate case. That one, I don't know. But there had to be something going on, all right? But when it comes to a premeditated murder, I do believe an eye for an eye. I honestly do.
It's hard. It's hard for me. I part of me agrees and part of me disagrees, which is why we have this. That's why we have, opposition and different parties.
I'm not opposition,
and
man.
stuff. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking
I'm
about
running for Prime Minister one day, by the way, guys. Hey, man, don't kill my chances on this podcast, yeah? You're going to be Prime Minister one day, but anyway. So, yeah, but I do believe in that part. That part is very crucial because if you don't see it, then I wouldn't go. But is violence a necessary consequence for it? That's another debate altogether.
That's the thing. And it is the ultimate violence.
Yeah, because it's the end all. Because you ended someone's life, and I think that it's fair for you to be hung or whatever whatever the judge or whatever your judgment is for your case. That part, I think, on a humane factor, I say 100% yes. He should hang. But the other part of it, how fast should he hang? I think as fast as he can, not staying in prison for 9, 10, 15 years before he walks into a gallery.
Yeah, but that's also debatable because some prisoners are like,
No, you can fight your case.
Well, that's for you,
case.
right?
Yeah.
If it was you, you'd want to get it over and done with. But I mean, I wouldn't know unless I was actually there, and I do come back to the fact that most people that end up in court, most people that end up, whether it's something small like drink driving or fairly small like drink driving,
but it takes a few years though,
or like drink driving compared to a drug offense, it's still breaking the law, and you're still gonna have to. There's still a consequence.
That's the other thing, right? So that's one thing I strongly mandate. But when it comes to drugs, though, that's where it's got a very gray area in between. That's where I think again we spoke about this in the office. I think that gray area is something that I find a bit hard to come to terms with, because I think definitely what your point earlier, I think you should share anyway. To be honest. Is pretty much on point. Well,
most people that end up in there have, I wouldn't say issues, but have trauma in their history.
No,
right?
I'm talking about the guys that were sent to the gallows. They are probably traffickers, right?
Yeah, but adding on to my earlier point is that most people that end up in this, there is the crime, the addiction, it is a symptom of something else, and it's usually got to do with how this person grew up, environmental, whether the environment caused them to have psychological issues, and the psychological issues, it's a whole. That's why we have counselors. That's why we accept psychologists.
We don't. I think we had this. I think we kind of established this already, though, Jen. We never really deal the symptoms. We always deal with the consequences, and we work ourselves backwards. And that's what it's always been here.
So maybe it's a good time. Maybe that's why it's so relevant for
even bring. Yeah, I think that exactly. Even us just bring up alcohol addiction as a government established what do you call it? A policy that even started in March last month.
Yeah,
took them that long to figure it out. That it wasn't illegal to be addicted. Yeah, and the Medishield or Medicare, which is a government institute.
I think that's a great thing, by the way.
But it took us that long to get there, though.
I know. Well, at least we're there now. But it's conversations like this,
right?
That
opens
help.
Up. Yeah,
That help. The whole point of us talking about this is to try and let's try and find. There's always room for improvement, right?
But it's not just so much a room for improvement. We all know there's so much more. Every single aspect of where we live or what we do. So much the speed of how we do it, because the people who are suffering from these issues don't normally have that timeline to go like, all right, let's wait for this to happen while I shoot up another line of coke. That's not really how it works for them, right? The government's going to sort me out one day. Or I can go to a rehab center and solve my issues. It doesn't work this way. If you're stuck here, where are you going to go? Are you going to prison? Or are you going to prison? Right? What are you going to do? And that's the other part of it. Someone who really wants to change themselves, where do they go?
Well, we're also talking intergenerational trauma, you know, like you find, like, there is, I can't, we should have found a study for this, and I apologize for that, but there is a thing, there's more drug issues in poor areas.
Yeah, definitely.
So poverty, addiction, and drugs and crime, they're all connected.
Definitely.
You know, and a lot of that does come from intergenerational stuff where it carries on, and unfortunately for most of the people that are on the edge.
And race, don't forget race as well.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it as well.
Yep. And well, disadvantage that is tied to race. Right, the privileged and the unprivileged, and you know how they had that video where it's like where they were trying to explain what privilege is, and if you have this, take a step forward. If you have this, take a step forward. And then you turn around and you see all your friends back there. None of them had any of them opportunities that we as the privileged ones have. Right, so
but because they were all
but it is tied to race. But
the certain color. That's what the video was trying to prove.
Correct.
They were trying to prove white privilege and black lack of privilege. No, but that doesn't really, I mean, to a certain extent, does apply here, but you do realize...
No, it is the stats.
You do realize.
The stats speak for themselves.
We know who are the drug users, and 90% what race they are. Alcohol abusers know exactly what race they are. Gambling addicts know exactly what race they are. We kind of know this, right? But the thing is that in a bigger proportion of scale of pure value of population, it doesn't apply. It's 10% of, say, 5 million compared to 10% of 500,000. That's a lot more people.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So that's the other part of what we don't see. But, but it's very tied to your socioeconomic status. If you're not going to write your parents don't
your
believe,
environment
or whatever. I do believe it plays a very big part.
It does.
But that big part applies because, and you can discount this race part because I think you and I wouldn't know as much as I think someone else would. But I'm sure it's a huge part to play for them not being able to get the access they need to get to a place they wanted to be.
Well, my personal experience is a bit different because, we grew up quite privileged. You know, if you've never been hungry, I think there was something about if you have access to clean water. If you have access to toilet,
food,
if you
water,
can read,
shelter, that's it.
If you can read, about being in the top 1% or 10% of the world, and that's what it means. If you have access to clean water, a bathroom, education, the internet, then you are in the top 10% of the world, because we don't realize how many people, there's still millions of people that don't even have access to these basic things.
Listen, I went to school to study this. I'll tell you exactly what the 3 core factors are. It's called shelter, food, and water.
Yep.
That's it. There's no internet all that involved.
No. This is something else. This is when I was working with the charity, right? And we were doing stats on privilege and disadvantage in the most impoverished places in the world. So we're talking about, I think it's the numbers are pretty intense. It's 20 or 30% of every person in the world, 20 or 30% of people in the world don't have access to clean water.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so that's what I mean. Yeah. So if you have all these things that I listed before, you're in the top 10% of privilege in the world. But then that doesn't bring us back, the privilege is a scale depending on where you are, right? So if we're talking about right here, then we didn't grow up with we didn't grow up in an environment that we want to escape.
That's a tough one.
I've lived in Australia and we were playing music, and I started on the street busking. When you play music on the street, you meet all kinds of people, right? You meet the street kids who are at risk. They're really at risk. They I see them. I'm playing from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock to try and get the pub crowd, and they'll come out and they'll jam with you and everything. So you'll see the street kids, and some of them are really young. They shouldn't be out, but they are. right? And then you go, well, where are your parents? And their parents are usually addicts themselves, so they're not really, so these kids are running around. And then you also meet the people who are full on addicts, and their life is hard, very tough. They sleep rough, and for them it's the only thing that helps numb things is substance, right? And coming back to Singapore and realizing my own privilege and comparing that to the people I have met, the people I have, like, I volunteered with some of these kids, so I didn't grow up like that, but if I did, who's to say I wouldn't be exactly in that position?
Correct. Yeah.
If I did grow up in that, I don't think I'd be as strong as these kids. I actually admire them for being stronger than me sometimes, like a friend of mine was saying, there's this girl, when she grew up, having to turn, when she come home from school, and her parents would be on the couch passed out with needles still coming out of their arms. So she would actually come to her parents, take the needles out, put the plaster on their arm, turn them on their side so that if they throw up, they wouldn't choke to death. And then go make herself lunch. She's 8 years old. Go make herself lunch, and then do her homework. And then her parents would get up, and then it'd be like the next day it'd be the same thing again. And I'm like, this child is 8 years old. She turned out, she became a nurse. She became a nurse, which is like, it's beautiful, but she's the exception.
Yeah.
Out of 100 kids that do grow up like this. Like,
but I think,
how many of them actually,
you are normally a product of your environment. That's a fact. There's no disagreeing with that.
No,
I'm not disagreeing. Of course, you have that one or two success stories that we all highlight in every newspaper, articles, books, or whatever. But there's the other 99 people that everyone forgets, right? But my point is that if you systemize this into a certain way, there has to be fundamental flaws, not just say so much about individual behavior. Because if I ask him to break down numbers for me based on what was the lowest common factor among all these families, I'm sure it will be a lot different than just that.
Yeah, that's interesting. We should look at that after.
Man, you understand in MCYS, is it MCYS? Social or SDF, so social job. Yeah, find out how many families are on welfare in Singapore and what is the predominant race. And then maybe from there we can figure out why. Because that's a much deeper conversation to have, Jen.
Much deeper.
And then why they end up being the way they end up, or is it because, what? But then again, we digress. It's not funny because I get it, right?
But we're not really digressing because all these things do feed into it.
Exactly, but the thing is that part that I think we absolutely should understand. It's based on population size of race, and I can't say that everyone's given a fair shot in life because it's definitely not true. We were lucky in certain ways. Obviously, we were.
Yeah.
We were given a pretty decent chance to make the best out of ourselves.
Yeah.
And somehow, not many of us sitting at this table took it. So, well, I didn't. Let's put it this way. So,
well, I've had my downs, but I think in general
you did okay for yourself. I did. So let's put it this way.
So have you.
But that part is we were given opportunities. But when you're not given any and you have to go make your own, and if you don't know how to make your own, you know how much, and where you live is a problem. That all stems from where you're allowed to live because of X amount of money that your family has. So it all starts from everything, systematically everything. If you do this basic math that G-Man's doing, I can say it out loud now, but I wouldn't unless I get my facts down. Yeah, it's a true story. But fundamentally, in Singapore, we always turn a blind eye to poverty because we don't see it.
We have a small population that like statistically our percentages when it comes to like poverty,
We don't have a small population. Jen.
no. I meant we have a small percentage, not a small population. So we have a small part of our population
That lives under poverty?
that lives that so we don't see it as much as in some other countries with a larger population and more people that are in that bracket.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So
But the thing is that we should not also discount that there are a lot here in Singapore that we don't see. A lot more that we don't see because we walk down.
we don't see it. We're not in that. Yeah. But I do have friends that are there.
Yeah, I know that we should have this conversation one day
We should.
about being poor in Singapore.
We
really
should. We should.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but poverty does play a very huge part in substance abuse. I think your circumstances does
Yes. Very, very much so.
somehow I think dictate your choices.
Very, very much so. You know, that's why for me it's like I don't really understand how we penalize consumers in Singapore, like because as if you're an addict or if you're caught with anything on your person, even if it's not a trafficking amount, you get in trouble for that. Yeah. Whereas I know we shouldn't compare other countries and stuff like that, but it is a global world, and we're trying to make things better. Yeah. So let's, if we can discuss it, then in some other places the penalties are heavier for a trafficker and lighter for someone who's like a recreational user or just I don't know, just out with their friends or whatever. Yeah. So. But then that's that whole debate of, okay, well, that's the micro. What if we look at the macro? And therefore, there's this whole system of heavy penalties. We prevent that stuff and we don't have to think about it. And I'm not disputing the effectiveness of it. I'm just coming from a compassionate and humane perspective and think, okay, well, some of these people are not criminals. Some of these people need help. That's where I'm coming from. It's not the maliciousness behind any of this, and it's it's either they need help or it's just simply a recreational choice. But then it goes back to what society in general decides what's okay and what's not okay. Like that said, right? I was in Australia and I was volunteering with some like poor kids, right? There's predators that try to sell to children, and me, I always want to protect kids, yeah. So it was a big thing for me to see, some of these kids were like 10, 12, and they're in that intergenerational part. They're in that part where their parents are at home, they're incapacitated. That's why these kids are running around, and therefore these kids become prey.
Yeah.
For the people that want to, and some of these people that sell aren't consumers themselves. So for them, it's a business, and therefore, is that maliciousness? And therefore, is it justified that we punish these people? Because then we are looking at, man. There are children in Australia, and I'm sure there are young people here as well. Okay, that are becoming addicted to these substances before they're 15, man.
I think that also
Very, very young people, man.
Ask another question now, Jen. I just asked another question. Is it just again? I digress. In Australia, though, with the people you worked with, the people you were around with, when they were targeting these 10 to 12-year-old kids, were they from a certain background? What was that one thing that they had in common, besides having parents that were already doped up or high or something?
They did grow up in a not similar environment, but no, they had more privilege, and it's simply.
We never talk about privilege. We said, what's that one common factor that you think you could pick out?
Location. Like I honestly met some people that actually, it's almost sociopathic. I'm sorry, but I have met, like, I did run into a couple of them in my while I'm playing music, and you're like on the outskirts, and I'm volunteering with these kids. I see stuff, right? So I have met some people that, for them, it's almost sociopathic. It's purely for money, and they don't care who gets hurt, whether it's children, grown-ups. They actually don't care. It's about money, and in a way, there's an element of power. And I've seen it. I've been to a party where and I stopped hanging out with them after that. So I went to a party, and he's selling to his friends, right? And I'm like, these are your friends. Like, they went to high school together, and he doesn't consume it himself, and I didn't know this was going on until I went to that party, and I saw that happening, and I went, well, okay, now I get it. This person is not a friend. This person, you should not be around this person, because
he's a shark who eats his own kind.
Yes, and that shocked me, because I'd never met people like that before. So then, is it okay that we punish these people? Because in that sociopathic space, or that I don't care about you, it's all about me, it's about my money, it's about making money. There's trauma there too. That person is also a damaged person. If you look at it from a holistic point of view, this person is also slightly unwell, right? Let's put it that way. So,
like a certain.
So then, is it okay that we kill him?
Like a certain. Like a certain ex-president that used to run a country in this world. Absolutely, the narcissism and the absolute sociopathic thought processes.
You don't matter at all.
It's all about me.
Yes.
It's me. The bright lights. Come on, camera, shine. It's whatever I say. Drink bleach. Snort washing powder. Whatever. Right? It's so true. It's so true.
And it's shocking, it was completely shocking for me.
It's how qualms, because he will kill his own friends.
Yeah, exactly. And these kids grew up together.
You know what kind of a creature does that? Snakes. They'll eat their own babies if they have to, if they're hungry.
But that's what I mean. So,
and if I ask
is it okay? Is it okay that we sentence this person to death?
I'll 100%.
I don't know. I really don't, because I look at it and I see that all of that is also suffering.
Yeah, but it's not the same equivalency though, Jen. He's not suffering per se, he's suffering without knowing what he's doing. Isn't it different though?
Yeah, they are aware.
They're extremely aware of what they're doing. I don't think there's any way you can say.
I wonder, do they get pleasure out of it? Do they? It's kind of like.
It's like Ted Bundy, right? Or it's like Charles Manson, right? It's like any other guys can think of. Remember that we were talking about this movie called The Serpent that Netflix. I kind of watched it when I was at home a couple of days ago.
Oh yes, like that.
Like these guys are mentally, like they get some kind of pleasure out of doing of this. I mean, financially they might get rewarded, but it wasn't like that kind of the narcissism and the sociopathic is one thing.
The self, it's profit as well.
There is a certain element, but I think a lot of it they get high off.
It's so hard to understand because we're not.
Yeah, but do you think that they deserve it? I think 100%. Jen.
I don't know. I really don't.
Man.
What has led this person to that point? That is my thing, Did they grow up in an environment where there is...
Normally they don't, though.
Yeah.
Normally they don't, though.
Have they grown up in an environment where there is very little love?
Yeah.
There is no affection. There's been a study done, the sociopathic gene, right? And the study is...
We're digressing a lot.
I know. There's a few people that have this gene, but it only activates based on your environment.
Yeah.
So we could have this gene.
Exactly. There was this thing that they wrote about the top 50 CEOs in the world.
Yeah.
And they all possess that same gene. As Charles Manson, as Ted Bundy, they all share that one thing.
The drive.
Yeah, but the drive for pleasure was different for them. And there's this great documentary that you guys should actually watch. I mean it. It's like the top 50 CEOs in the world, they share the same gene or the same mental thing as the top 50 serial killers in the world.
Holy crap.
Yeah. It's a great thing on, I know, I saw
Okay,
it.
that's really interesting, but it's what I said.
Yeah,
It's
the sociopathism, that all that.
Yeah, and it activates based on your environment. So you and I could have it, but we grew up in loving environments, so it never quite.
But we drive in a different way, and they drive off down a ditch. We go like. Up, Yeah, but it was a great documentary. Go and watch it. I mean, whoever, go and Google it. There's the top 50 CEOs and top 50 mass murderers or serial killers. They share the same DNA when it comes to
that's pretty intense and
But how they utilize it was a lot different. Because serial killers are a lot smarter than the average person.
Well, they want to get but on one hand they want to get away with it, but on the other hand, towards the end, they could usually want to get caught because they want the glory,
the name and the fame and all that. Yeah.
Which is so many levels of twisted. Like it's.
It's twisted. So, but anyway, we digress.
Yes.
Let's get back to what we were talking about and how I think we should look back into.
Well, this feeds into what we're talking about. We're talking about the people. You know, the death penalty, all that. We can look at all the stats, but it's people.
But Jen, the people who actually go into prison and get to the gallows, I don't know exactly, I'm not talking about CEOs or Ted Bundy types who know what they're doing. They normally, a lot of them probably don't even know what the consequences of the actions are. And that's what I always say. I think you and I will probably agree upon this, is that I don't think there should be a mandatory death sentence for trafficking, because if you already caught the person, you probably confiscated all the goods that's coming out of it. We have a pretty decent ICA or border patrol or whatever that we call it.
And the penalties would probably be pretty
severe
heavy
enough as they are.
And I mean, we have caning.
We do have caning as well, and that's brutal.
Messed
that's
up.
something as well that I think we should be. This like medieval time kind of punishments.
Yeah.
But it works, right? But I think legalizing drugs, I don't think all drugs should be legalized. Like going back to where we started, cannabis is okay, I think. I think half the world is probably going to legalize it in a while anyway. If Singapore doesn't do it, I think we are again going back to medieval times. And also, I think the other part is us understanding as a society, we're a lot older now. Now you can stop us from having a vape or chewing our chewing gums, but I don't think we are that, you know what I'm saying? Okay,
let's bring it back to that, right? Say, and I like to think about it this way. If it's my kids, right? If it's my kids, and honestly, I want them to be safe. I want my kids to be safe. I want my kids to grow up, you know, with as little pain and suffering and well, you know, I want them to grow up with wellness and being surrounded by that. Yeah.
Then you shouldn't be in Singapore. Then you raise them.
I have thought about that, you know, because the drugs are illegal here. I have thought, well, then at least they're not growing up around it. And
no, I was saying quite the opposite. If you want to go with wellness and love and care and appreciation and everything, I don't think I'll raise my kid here in Singapore ever in my life. But again, that's a different question for a different day.
Especially since we have lived overseas. Yeah. No, but the safety that we have here, I appreciate so much more now that I have been in those situations where it's, you know, and I grew up quite sheltered. We grew up until we went overseas and we were exposed to all this, and then we go, okay, now we need to, you need to look out for this sort of stuff. And I didn't have that, you know, until
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And then, so part of me, and especially with like COVID as well, like my appreciation for this country has just grown. Like, I don't.
Again, I will have to.
I know.
Claim the fifth.
We will.
I'll claim the fifth on this one.
Yeah. But you know, like.
Nah, but it's a beautiful place. I mean, we are so lucky. I tell you, there are all few of us are sitting here today. We're very lucky to be from here. But at the same time, when I talk about raising my kids and all that kind of stuff, I will say, nah, I think I've got my own opinions on it. But it's a very safe country to But I bring them back here to school, yeah, definitely. But like I said, my partner's also from a pretty decent, safe country, so I'm not too worried about that. But it's just a lifestyle thing. But the other part of where we were going before we went to this is just that I feel like we should actually come and look into understanding that, that Singapore is a lot older now, or the people that actually we should be allowed to take on, or they should be allowed to be able to make their choices on whether cannabis is good for you, or whether definitely I would say heroin and all the other class A drugs should be definitely legally disallowed, but also how you charge someone for certain crimes should be rethinked. I think the death penalty is not my go-to. I said for anything in life, except for murder, that I'll give you that. That's really debatable, but I will still give you that one. An eye for an eye is something I always believe in. But drugs, I don't know, man. I think that there are things that, because when we go through the studies, the people that are caught for trafficking are between the age of 20 to 29. You're not exactly at your sharpest, and you're from
20 and 20, between 20 and 29.
Yeah,
so it's
most of them.
young offenders.
Young offenders. I mean, they don't even know what's happening. And 95% of them are crossing from the borders to come here because they get a bit of money. I just had a story from G-Man who told me that this guy just needed 5,000 ringgit to get his sister's education. So, for example, a guy who needs like 10,000 ringgit just to say, pay off his bills for his house so his family doesn't go homeless. It's really situational when these guys do the things they do. And also, those are the guys who know what they're doing.
People who are desperate.
Yeah, who know what they're doing. But then also a huge part, I think there's a part of it that people who actually have no idea what they're doing. If someone comes to you, here's 500, can you bring across the border and come back?
Or like mules.
Yeah, they wouldn't know, right?
No.
It's a huge percentage of that as well, G-Man, right? Drug mules. How many people, bro? Check for me how many drug mules that go to and then they hang here.
Yeah, but how could you not know? How could you not know
Because
that if someone gives me a package and say I'm going to pay you a lot, but depending on how much they're paying me, I've got to know something's up.
It could be uncle, for example, like, hey Jinjin, here's can you just bring this over? My friend John is going to wait for you down there. Pass it to him and come back. How do you know? You be like, yeah, okay, sure. Here's 500 for your travels. Would you have asked him?
No, not if it's my family.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases, your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Or your whatever. It happens so many times, man. And women are, that's true though, G-Man, yeah? Women have always been a case of these mules.
More vulnerable to be...
Not men though. Yeah, that's true, I think. The stat has got to back up. A lot of men
more vulnerable to being used.
Yeah, to go and...
Yeah.
I think so. I think there's a stat to that as well.
Well, that does make sense to me.
I'm pretty sure.
But there's that element of desperation, right? But then I'm playing devil's advocate, right? But then I'd be like, well, everybody that gets caught will have some story, right? My this, my that, but. Of course, it has to be backed up. It has to be backed up. Yeah. They can't just say and.
Yeah, it's not like she's been she does this for the first. She was no cases of previous drug addiction, whatever. You can't just she generally just woke up and said, "No, I'm going to bring in 200 kilos of heroin to Singapore because I can." We have no previous criminal history, no absolutely nothing. Why would someone actually wake up and do that? Right? There has to be some kind of justifiable reason behind it, right?
Or justifiable to them, yeah? Like whether it's
or being coerced into doing it or forced into doing
whatever,
it.
yeah.
Because your boyfriend just say, you know what, you're okay, darling, it's okay, it's just my luggage. Bring it back home for me, I'll meet you in 2 days. You wouldn't bat an eyelid, would you? Woman
especially if you're in love and if you're young.
Yeah, young and
you're in love. You're young and you're in love, or being in love by being manipulated or whatever.
Yeah. You wouldn't bet an eyelid, would you? That's what I keep saying. And I think that women have a biggest case of the mule thing.
Well, but it's interesting because I have a friend in Australia who did time in a Cambodian prison.
No way.
And he's very upfront about it. He's like, I did it for the money. He's just straight up. He's just like, it was the money, man. And he knows what he did is illegal. He knows what he did was like, I don't know wrong or right, but he knows it was illegal.
Yeah.
And when he got done for it, he's like,
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. There are guys who could do it out of like, but if they don't get anyone implicated or getting anyone involved in your rubbish, I think if you're going in your own ding dong. No, I mean it though, Jen. Honestly, if you do your own ding dong, the perils are yours, the consequences are yours, and no one else is implicated, no one's involved. You know what's going to happen to you at the end of the day. I don't think I will. But once you get people involved and all the other kind of stuff, then I think you're putting the wrong guy in the gallows. That's what I think.
Well, then it brings us back to the fundamental question: Is any reason good enough for state-sanctioned execution?
Yeah.
Okay, because there are when you go all the way to it, when it comes right down to human rights and people that do hold that space, is there any reason for this? And they call it murder. Yeah. Is there anything that can truly justify murder for a murder? That's it's not my opinion. I'm just saying,
Yeah, you just answered it. Murder for a murder.
Yeah. So I it's hard for me. It's really hard for me because like we spoke about it already. If my family was the victim, then I would feel differently. If my family was the perpetrator, I'd feel differently. I'd do anything I could to stop them from being hung. Anything, and it'd be like you did something wrong, and but
there's also that certain thing that we spoke about earlier, was the fact that it had to be premeditated. If it's going to be something like a culpable homicide or that, I think if two girls got into a fight and someone fell down and broke his head and passed on, then I think that has got a different connotation to where I think I'll take it. But if I do honestly believe something is premeditated, then yeah, Jen, of course, man, eye for an eye, man. I believe in that.
Well, the other thing is, then how do we consider what is family? Is it only our immediate family? Is it only...
What does family have to play into anything?
No, because that's what I was talking about. I was saying, like, if it was my family, then I would feel differently if my family was the perpetrator, and if my family was the victim. And tying that back in, how big is all of Singapore our family? Is all of the people that live in our suburb our family? Is the whole world our family? And then therefore, where do we
draw the line? Yeah,
where do we start to go? This society in Singapore, everyone is family and everyone is important. Then that changes things as well, because then you go, the perpetrator was my family and the victim was my family. Now what do we do?
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm asking you a simple question. Remember, I think we spoke about this, about thinking emotionally and thinking mentally. Consciously what's right or wrong. Most of us would know what's right or wrong. It doesn't matter whose family is what. But emotionally, you'll feel a very different way. It happens to someone that you're very close to, or someone's related to you, or someone could be your best friend, or someone. Then it will affect your judgment of what you think is right or wrong. But technically, you do know what is right or wrong. I think we did have this debate. But are we, as Singaporeans, believing in the fact that there is certain things that we can condone because it's a Singaporean overseas who murdered someone? Do you think we, as a country, we go like, oh no, man, that's how you go like,
most people would say, well, you commit the crime, you do the time.
Exactly,
that's
right? That's what we
would
say, right? But the same thing would not be different for his family, right? And so that rationale has got to come into play. It's not the same though, Jen. You can't just go put a blanket over the whole thing and go like, how would you feel about someone?
No. But we do need to
fundamentally talk. We know what's right or wrong.
Yes, but we do need to talk about this because we're talking about society in general that we are part of.
Correct.
That's the thing. We are not we look at ourselves as individuals, but whether we like it or not, we are part of this society.
Yeah, Jen, but as a society, we also know what's the right thing to do. No?
Yes.
That's how we coexist. That's how we all came sitting here today and doing what we're doing. Because we kind of have certain kind of beliefs and decorum or some kind of etiquette or some things that we do as a society.
There's a thing about it. There's the things that we agree upon. Actually, yeah. We should speak to one of my friends. He's a sociology professor. So yeah, there's a few things, and it's agreements. We make agreements with each other.
Non-verbal, non-binary agreements, but agreements anyway.
We make these, and laws are part of those agreements.
Yeah, but also a lot of this NLP, a lot of our neo-linguistics is based on that as well, right? Our NLP, our way we connect with the people that we have around is basically on the set of beliefs you have. That's how you somehow have the friends that you have. Don't you think so? You connect with certain people in different ways. But as a society, yeah, we all believe in that one core aspect of what we all believe in. That's how we move forward as a country or a society or whatever. And like I say, don't get emotions to blind your judgment. The judgment is one thing that you know is going to happen. But your emotion is going to get you upset or happy about whatever came out of the judgment.
It's hard to remove the emotional part of it when it's someone's
That's what
life.
I was telling you about, the whole thing about the top 50 CEOs and top 50 serial killers.
Is that they can remove the emotion.
Exactly out of their heart. And it's just basically what they want to do.
So then we're talking empathy.
Not empathy, but a lack of. And the fact that it's driven to a certain success point that they want to get at. So that's where they drive or they go into, but that's for both different things, yeah? So that they say Charles Manson wouldn't think twice about stabbing someone in the heart, whereas this guy said, I wouldn't think twice about saying or scolding my CFO to get me to a better place. That's the difference, right?
Scale.
Their highs are different.
There's a scale.
No, their highs are very different. But these guys are thinkers. They're both thinkers. They don't really put emotions to it. I think there's a great documentary about it, though. I've seen it. I've watched it. Yeah, just completely out of their touch points are all gone.
Well, that's why, I mean, everybody's different, yeah? And for me, looking at it, I just think that's somebody's child.
We all do.
I know. The perpetrator is someone's child, the victim is someone's child. And that's, I personally, coming from a humanist, humane perspective, a snowflake perspective, whatever, it's just hard because it's like, what if...
It is hard. It's not easy
it doesn't matter how far away this person is from me, from my family or whatever, it's still a person. You go... But then...
I get it, but now I think I see
They're
again.
too soft.
No, not
maybe.
too soft. Again, we digress. If I tell you a Singaporean guy goes overseas and kills someone, what do you think his judge? You would say, yeah, he better go and die, man.
I don't know if I.
You just agreed with me about 5 minutes ago. Now you're saying no. But the thing is, I don't think there's anything that would distinguish how we feel. Like I feel like we always move the goalpost where it's convenient. And that is emotional. But as a country, as a society, I don't think it's that straightforward that I can feel something about someone who's done absolute horror to someone.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't have that
like
kind of empathy
torture,
or sympathy. Or even getting a 6 or 7-year-old girl, kidnap her from a hawker center in Singapore, as a case, I think, in Singapore, did not... The things I kind of want to see on camera and kill her and bury her, and you want me to feel sympathy for this guy? I'm sorry.
It's
sorry.
very difficult.
I know. I'm in Singapore. I cannot feel that.
Yeah. I understand.
And I will go and kill him myself if I have to. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, then, but that's really how I feel.
I do agree on a level, but then I have to look at the other. I can't help but agree and disagree.
That's you,
right?
Yeah.
And I think most people do have a agree and disagree portion. It's just the scale.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, on that note, we have run out of time, but I'm really glad that, you know, at least we're having a conversation that we haven't had, you know, like over the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years. You know, I guess it shows that we are maturing in a way that we can sit here now and have a mature, open conversation about it. Whether or not we solved anything tonight, the whole point is to try and all of us collectively, you know, move in a good direction. So I'm glad. But yes, so thank you for joining us, and thank you, Kesh. And thank you, me. And thank you, VJ. And thank you, G-Man. So we will see you next time. And yeah, good night.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah. And let us know what you think.
No, really don't. But try to, but really don't. Okay.